I should have never married an old hag like you. Younger women are so much better. I can't even walk with you in public. You embarrass me. If I could, I'd go back in time and start over. These were the hurtful words my ex-husband Tom said to me 10 years ago. My name is Elizabeth and I'm 48 years old. I married Tom when I was 33. He was 5 years younger than me. I was a nurse and we met at the hospital where I worked. Tom had just finished his training as a doctor and was new there. He often asked me questions and I found his innocence charming. I wanted to support him, but I never thought about dating him since I was older and he was a doctor. Despite that, he talked to me every day and eventually we started dating. I was worried about our age difference, but he didn't seem to care, so I stopped worrying too. After 2 years of dating, we got married. But after 5 years, he started verbally abusing me, saying he should have married a younger woman. At work, he would flirt with younger nurses right in front of me, but I ignored it because I didn't want to cause a scene and make myself feel worse. Then one day, I found out Tom had been cheating on me with a former patient. She was 10 years younger than me, and I had never met her because I worked in a different department. When I confronted him, he laughed and said, "It's no surprise we couldn't have kids with an old lady like you. My girlfriend is having my baby." I couldn't stay with a man like that anymore, so I agreed to a divorce. I told Tom and his girlfriend that I would be seeking alimony. This made Tom furious. He yelled, "I was stuck with an old hag for 5 years and you want alimony? I should be the one getting paid." He never expected that I would ask for alimony after his affair. Even Tom's father called me, defending his son's actions and saying it was natural for a young man to be attracted to a younger woman. I was shocked. Tom refused to pay, so I consulted a lawyer. The lawyer reassured me that I had the right to ask for alimony, and I decided to leave everything to them. I'd often heard that getting a divorce is harder than getting married, and I truly felt that way. Thankfully, with my lawyer's help, I was able to get the proper alimony, end the lease on the apartment we shared, and start living alone. I changed my last name from Evans back to my maiden name, Britton. The only good thing was that Tom switched to another hospital. As a final insult, he said, "I wouldn't want to be in a hospital with a greedy old hag like you." He thought that leaving me for his mistress and marrying her quickly wouldn't make anyone upset, but I was surprised at how prepared he was. He had already lined up a new job. Still, people talk, and I often heard whispers about how I was dumped by my younger husband. It felt like everyone was looking at me with judgment. Eventually, I became paranoid, thinking people were always spreading rumors about me, and it affected my mental health. In the end, I left the hospital where I worked. I spent some time doing nothing, but since I love working, I decided to find a new job. Luckily, I found a small maternity clinic just 2 train stops away from where I lived, and they hired me on the spot. It was a small hospital with few staff, but everyone got along well with the patients. They even complimented me, saying, "Miss Britton, you're very observant and the patients really like you. We're lucky to have you." Unfortunately, my peaceful days didn't last long. One day, a pregnant woman referred from another hospital arrived, and her name caught my attention, Sarah Evans, the same last name as Tom's mistress. I checked, and sure enough, her husband's name was Tom Evans, a doctor. It was my ex-husband Tom. His new hospital didn't have an obstetrics department, and they had recently moved nearby, which is why they were referred to us. I had changed my name back after the divorce, and Sarah didn't seem to recognize me. I couldn't believe I had run into them here, but I decided not to tell anyone that she was my ex-husband's mistress. A few days later, Tom came with his wife for her checkup. His eyes widened in shock when he saw me. He must not have expected me to be there, and I certainly didn't want to see him either. "What are you doing here?" he asked, and his wife realized who I was. "Wait, is she?" Sarah said. "Did you come to this hospital just to harass us?" "Of course not," I replied. "I was here first. There's no way I could have known you'd move near this hospital." But Tom wouldn't listen. He accused me of following them. "You're stalking me, aren't you? Trying to harass me?" "Don't be ridiculous," I said. "Why would I do that? You're just a greedy woman who squeezed money out of me after being dumped because you're old. Who knows what you'll do?" Tom shouted all of this in the examination room, and suddenly everyone knew about our relationship. I felt all eyes on me, and even though I knew Tom was in the wrong, it made me very uncomfortable. Tom's wife added to the drama by saying, with fake tears, "Oh, I'm scared. I feel like I've been looked at maliciously since I came here. What if something happens to my baby?" Tom then told the doctor firmly, "I don't know what she's capable of, so please don't let her get near my wife." The doctor in charge asked me to leave the room. I knew they didn't really suspect me, but the easiest way to calm things down was for me to leave. I understood that the patient's care comes first, and I didn't want to stay there either, but it made me feel terrible. I started to feel uneasy around people because I didn't want the details of my messy divorce to spread. To make things worse, Tom's wife kept coming to the hospital and bad-mouthing me every time. Even though everyone knew I wasn't at fault, nobody said anything because she was a pregnant patient and they didn't want to upset her or interfere in personal issues. The atmosphere became unbearable for me. There were still 6 months until her due date, and I couldn't imagine staying in that environment for that long. Even though it was a good place to work, I decided to resign. The hospital director looked a little relieved when I told him, and that made me feel like I was being punished, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I was emotionally drained and didn't feel like looking for another hospital job, so I returned to my parents' home in the countryside. They welcomed me without saying much. At first, I couldn't bring myself to do anything, but I felt guilty for staying at home every day. Eventually, I took a part-time job at a nearby supermarket. It was my first time working outside of a hospital, but it felt refreshing. Even though I loved being a nurse and found it fulfilling, working in a hospital was stressful because I was responsible for people's lives. I could never let my guard down for a single day. Being away from that pressure was emotionally uplifting. 3 years after returning to my hometown, I was offered a full-time position at the supermarket. It seemed that my hard work had been recognized, and I was genuinely happy to accept the offer. 4 years later, something unexpected happened. The store manager approached me one day and asked, "Are you interested in trying an arranged marriage?" I was caught off guard. "Excuse me?" I replied. "I have just the right person for you," the manager said confidently. At 45 years old, I had no plans of remarrying, so I politely declined. But the manager was persistent. The person they were suggesting was a 47-year-old divorcee just like me, and he had also divorced due to his spouse's infidelity, though it happened 20 years ago. In the end, I couldn't refuse, so I agreed to meet him. Given our ages, we decided to meet directly without involving any intermediaries. When I arrived at the restaurant, my date was already there. As I entered the room, he suddenly stood up to greet me but accidentally bumped his forehead against the table. "Ouch," he exclaimed, rubbing his now red face. I couldn't help but laugh. It felt like something out of a comedy. "Hi, I'm James. Thank you for coming today," he said, clearly embarrassed. "Nice to meet you, I'm Elizabeth," I replied, still smiling. That little accident helped break the ice, and we quickly became comfortable with each other. As we talked, I learned that the reason this meeting was arranged was because James had actually fallen in love with me at first sight when he visited our supermarket during a business trip. It turns out the store manager was his college senior, and he had asked for this meeting to be arranged. By the end of the evening, he said, "I'd like to have a serious relationship if possible." I had gone to the meeting with the intention of refusing. In the end, I couldn't say those words. Instead, I found myself wanting to see James again. We continued dating, and after half a year, we decided to get married. Both of my parents adored his personality and were genuinely happy for us. Living with James, who was always so considerate and thoughtful, felt like a true blessing. Since we were both older, we never planned to have children. We just hoped to live a peaceful life together, hand in hand. However, life had its surprises. When I turned 48, my health began to decline, and I assumed it was due to age. But during a hospital checkup, I learned that I wasn't just sick, I was pregnant. I was in complete shock. I never imagined getting pregnant at this age, and I certainly didn't think my illness was morning sickness. When I shared the news with James, he was equally astonished. "It seems like there's a baby," I told him cautiously. "That's great. So who's the lucky one? Do I know them?" he asked with a playful smile. "You do know them very well," I replied. "They're right in front of you." James looked puzzled, then silent, as he slowly put the pieces together. "What? I'm the one who's pregnant." His eyes grew wide and he stared at my belly in disbelief. "Our baby," he repeated. When I nodded, he hugged me tightly, his voice filled with uncharacteristic surprise. "It's unbelievable, a miracle." I, too, felt overwhelmed by the situation. Though I had never really considered not having the baby, I couldn't help but worry about what lay ahead, especially given my age. Even the doctors at the hospital asked, "What do you want to do?" The decision felt monumental. I know that having a baby at an older age can be risky for both the mother and the child. I don't expect everyone to be supportive, and I'm sure some people will wonder how old I'll be when my child turns 20. I'm also worried about whether I'll be able to raise a child at my age. Still, I can never imagine ending this new life growing inside me. When I told my husband about the pregnancy, he immediately said, "Of course, yes," and I was happy because I thought it showed how he truly felt. But as time passed, he became concerned about my health. We both knew the risks, so we talked to our doctor and decided together to go ahead with the pregnancy. Both our parents were shocked and worried, but they were also happy for us. We decided to give birth at a large hospital with the best care. The doctor was very kind and reassuring. One day when I went for a checkup, the plan was for both the obstetrician and another specialist to be there, just in case. My husband couldn't come due to work, so I went alone. To my surprise, when I entered the examination room, my ex-husband Tom was there. I couldn't believe I ran into him in such an unexpected place. Tom looked at me and laughed. "Wait, seriously? You're the 48-year-old pregnant woman? Having a baby at that age is unbelievable." The doctor and nurse looked confused, but Tom just kept going. "An old woman like you getting pregnant? That's gross." I was already nervous and his words were cruel. I replied, "You have no right to say that to me." Tom shot back, "What's with the attitude? Most of the patients here are wealthy. You don't even belong in this hospital." I was furious. "Excuse me, Dr. Evans," I said to the obstetrician. "I'm leaving. I would never give birth in a place where a doctor like him works." As I started to leave, the nurse whispered to the doctor, "Dr. Evans, that woman is the wife of the Hair to the Miles Group, one of the hospital's biggest donors." Tom's face changed. "Wait, what?" Before I could respond, my husband arrived. "Sorry, I'm late. My wife has been really helpful to you all," he said, but then noticed how upset I was. Sensing something was wrong, he asked, "Is everything okay?" I told him, "This man, Dr. Evans, said that having a baby at 48 is disgusting." My husband's expression changed instantly when he realized Dr. Evans was my ex-husband. I had already told my husband about my previous marriage, and he knew Tom's name and job. So when my husband saw Tom, he immediately confronted him. "Are you Dr. Evans? Did you insult my wife?" my husband asked. Tom stammered, trying to explain, but my husband cut him off. "What kind of hospital allows a doctor to insult a patient? I can't trust my wife and unborn child in a place like this." Just then, the nurse who had left earlier returned with the hospital director. The director addressed us. "I heard there was some inappropriate behavior." My husband, still upset, replied, "Director, we came here because my father recommended this hospital, but I can't believe you'd employ a doctor like this. It seems we made a mistake in choosing this place." The director apologized immediately, saying, "I'm terribly sorry. This man is not our doctor anymore." "What?" Tom exclaimed, shocked. "I just fired him," the director continued. "I didn't realize his behavior was like this. I only hire him as a favor to a friend, but we don't need doctors who behave this way. He will never work here again." Tom, in disbelief, started shouting, "No, why?" But before he could say more, the obstetrician escorted him out of the room. As Tom was dragged away, the director continued apologizing profusely. We started to calm down, but my husband still wasn't satisfied. He asked the director, "Did you fire him because of my father's donations, or would you have allowed him to stay if not for that?" The director shook his head, looking disturbed by the whole situation. "Actually, Tom had only been working here for a week. His father is a former classmate of mine, and I hired him as a favor after we reconnected at a reunion." Tom had pleaded with the hospital director to give him a job, but the director had no idea Tom would behave like this and was genuinely sorry for the situation. He assured us that not all the doctors at the hospital were like Tom. In fact, the obstetrician who was supposed to handle my case was excellent, and if Tom hadn't been there, I would have been happy to give birth at this hospital. My husband agreed, and we continued with the plan to have the baby there. My father-in-law, who is the president of a major company, had donated a lot of money to this hospital because my mother-in-law had received treatment there when she was ill. That's why we chose this hospital for the birth. A few days later, Tom contacted us, begging us to talk to the director and get him rehired. It turned out Tom had a history of angering patients with his rude behavior and had been repeatedly fired from other hospitals. My ex-father-in-law had warned him that if he got fired again, he wouldn't have a future. I felt that my ex-father-in-law's leniency was partly to blame for Tom's behavior. When Tom called, my husband answered the phone and firmly told him that if he contacted us again or came near me, he would report Tom to the police for harassment. After that, Tom never called us again. Later, while we were leaving the hospital, we stopped by a convenience store and saw Tom working there. It seemed no other hospital would hire him. He was crying and said his wife and child had left him, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. I decided not to go to that convenience store anymore. The following year, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She's incredibly adorable, and no matter what happens, I'm committed to raising her with love and care. My husband is completely smitten with our daughter and has become a very indulgent father, so I need to make sure we find a good balance in parenting.